Hello YouTube and welcome to the next route learning video. This has actually been the most requested route that I make recently. I've had quite a number of requests for me to do a video on the London to Peterborough route, East Coast Main Line South. And so that's what I'm doing today, and on today's journey we're going to be travelling from Peterborough to London King's Cross, a distance of around 76.25 miles, and we'll be calling at Stevenage on the way. The train that we'll be driving is 1E25, the 1452 Aberdeen to London King's Cross service, which is due out of Peterborough at 21:18. This is an Armstrong Powerhouse scenario, and it comes from Armstrong Powerhouse scenario pack 36, I believe it is. Our attraction for the journey today is an HST, or high-speed train, which is probably the most iconic modern British train. They were designed, developed and built in the late 1970s, I believe, and I think the first run of these trains was in the very early 80s. The locomotive is a Class 43 locomotive with one at each end of the train, giving a power output of 2,250 horsepower per loco, with a maximum speed of 125 miles per hour. The MTU sound pack is installed, so this has the authentic sounds of the MTU engine, as you would hear on most HSTs throughout the country now, except the HSTs used on the Midland Main Line, which are operated with VP185 engines. Once in the cab of the HST, the only thing that we actually need to do before we start is put the reversing handle into the forward position. And now next to that you can see the throttle, which is a 5-step throttle, and then next to that the AWS reset, where the label's just appeared there. And then over on this side we have a 6-step brake, with the 7th step being the emergency position. Up here, the gauge in the middle of the screen is the brake cylinder pressure gauge, so as I increase the braking, you can see the needles, both needles climbing, which show how hard the brakes are applied. And then as I release the brakes, you can see them falling again. It's now time to depart, and the starting speed limit here is 25 miles per hour, and we've got around 48.75 miles to go to the next stop, which is Stevenage. As we get close to 25 miles per hour, I'm going to idle the power to allow the train to coast until we're able to accelerate further. To our right, the train that you can see leaving there is a Class 170 in cross-country livery. I believe these operate on Liverpool to Stansted Airport services. Also to the right of us, where you can see all the trains parked up, we're passing Peterborough Neen carriage sidings. As we enter this right-hand curve just coming up here, the speed limit is going up to 105 miles per hour. So I can now apply full power to accelerate up to that speed. The bridge that you can see just coming up is where we cross the River Neen. And down to the right, you can't see it here, is the Neen Valley Steam Railway, which is a preserved railway line. I believe it might be 10 to 15 miles long. I'm not 100% certain on that, so don't quote me on that. I believe the Neen Valley Railway used to run to Northampton. I know it was somewhere in that direction. One of the problems I find driving on a route like this is that there are actually not many speed changes, so there's not a huge amount to do quite often while driving. Just to point out, the speed limit has just gone up to 115 miles per hour. So yeah, as I was saying, there's not a lot to do while driving, which means I'm not 100% sure what I can say at times, just because there's very little to do with these speed changes. Most of this route has a speed limit of 125 miles per hour, with just a few small changes all the way from here to London. So the East Coast Main Line runs from London King's Cross to Edinburgh and Glasgow Central, also with services to Leeds, Newark Northgate, Lincoln. Also services to Hull and Sunderland, I believe. I think that's most of the places covered. And services are operated by East Coast Trains, Hull Trains and Grand Central for the high-speed express services. Also further north on the line, Cross Country operates quite a number of services from Edinburgh and Aberdeen and Newcastle down across the country towards Devon and Cornwall. Now got a warning for a speed limit reduction to 100 miles per hour, which is around half a mile from the Morpeth board. As we're just reaching 100 miles per hour now, I'm just going to cut the power down. I'm going to idle the power until we drop just slightly below 100, and then apply step 1 of power. We've now entered the 100 mile per hour speed zone. Within the next few years, HSTs and Class 91s, which both operate high-speed services on this route, are going to become a lot more rare to see, as they're going to gradually be replaced in the Intercity Express programme. Something which I find a little unfortunate, because I really like HSTs and Class 91s, they're two of my favourite trains. The speed limit's now going up to 105 miles per hour, so I'm just applying an extra step of power to step 2. And that should bring us up to around 105 at the next speed change, when the speed limit goes up to 125 miles per hour. As this scenario was made before the Class 91 was released for Train Simulator, unfortunately you won't see a Class 91 passes on this journey today. However, for those who like the Class 91, I certainly do. In fact, I consider it my favourite train. I am planning on covering this route in the other direction in a video coming up soon, and I'll do that in the Class 91 Loco. The reason why I'm in the HST for this video is because to go in this direction towards London I would have to be driving from the DVT end, and I just prefer to drive from the Loco end instead. The speed limit has now gone up to 125 miles per hour. Just after the AWS you just heard, that's when I apply full power to accelerate to the new speed limit. The East Coast Main Line has a lot more level crossings than you'd usually see on a high-speed main line in the United Kingdom. I'm not quite sure why that is. Personally, I think it may be a little safer if the roads didn't cross tracks with this kind of a speed limit on them. But yes, there's an awful lot of level crossings that we will pass on the journey into London, and so consequently there's also a lot of whistle boards that I've got to try and look out for. I often seem to miss one or two, so I'm going to try not to for this video. Coming up on the left now, we're going to be passing Conington sidings, and also Connington Loop, which is a freight loop where freight trains can be looped off the main line and held here until faster trains have accelerated and overtaken them. Although not my local line anymore, I do actually have many fond memories of this route from my childhood. When I was a kid, my parents didn't have a car, and so if we travelled around the country, we used to travel on the train. And I was born and grew up in Lincoln for the first few years of my life. And then after we moved down south, we used to visit Lincoln quite often. And the journey always involved a journey along the East Coast main line, often between London and Peterborough, in an HST or on a Class 91 set. Indeed, I can remember when I was a young kid being at Newark Northgate station and a Valenta HST screaming through at high speed and actually being scared of it because it was so noisy. But now I'd love to be able to hear that sound again, but unfortunately there aren't any Valenta HSTs left, apart from the prototype, which from what I understand is being restored. The East Coast Main Line is actually home to many British speed records. The first of these being the Mallard, which back in 1938, I think the year was, achieved a record speed of 126 miles per hour while going down Stoke Bank between Grantham and Peterborough. The HST achieved its speed record along this route in 1987 when an HST set managed to achieve a speed of 148 miles per hour. And finally, the Class 91 achieved the fastest speed record for a British locomotive when it achieved a speed of 162 miles per hour along this route. We're now approaching Huntingdon, and this is the start of 4-track running, and in fact will now be 4 tracks all of the way to between Nebworth and Welwyn North Station when we enter a double track section known as the Bottleneck. I'm going to idle the power at the next signal after this overbridge just coming up, as the speed limit will soon be dropping to 120 miles per hour. I've now idled the power, and at the very next signal the speed limit will be 120. So I'm just going to watch how the train coasts down in speed now, and if necessary just apply very light braking to ensure that we don't break the speed limit. As you can see, our speed has actually fallen to 120 miles per hour now. I've applied a step of power, and I'll apply an extra step if required to ensure that we don't lose too much speed. I believe that the river that you can see just on the right there is the River Ouse. Just applied a second step of power as I felt we were losing just a little bit too much speed there, and that should hopefully help us to just gain a little bit of speed and come back up towards 120. The speed limit is now going back up to 125 miles per hour, so I'm just applying full power once again to bring us back up to that speed. As you can see, even in full power, the train is struggling to accelerate to 125 miles per hour. We are on a slight uphill gradient, and the HST itself does tend to take a long time to accelerate at higher speeds. We're now approaching St Neots station. As we approach 125 miles per hour, I'm going to pull the throttle back to step 2. This should ensure that we don't break the speed limit. We will lose a little bit of speed when I do, and as the speed drops to around 123 to 124, I will bring the power back up to step 3, and then we should gradually accelerate back up to the speed. We're now passing through Sandy Station. We're now passing through Biggleswade. We're now approaching Arlesey station. As you can see, the signal ahead does not appear to be green, it appears to be showing a double yellow aspect, so at this point I'm now going to idle the power. This will be good practice to demonstrate what you need to do on this route when you reach a double yellow signal. Now that we've reached the AWS, I'm going straight into a full service brake application to bring our speed off quickly. If you're in an HST on this route and you get a double yellow signal and you don't make an immediate full service brake application, the chances are that you will not be able to stop in time for the red signal, if there is one. As you can see, we now have a single yellow signal aspect, so I'm going to continue braking, assuming that the next signal is red, until I can see otherwise. The lines now coming in from the left are the lines from Cambridge. And this section of track is known as a bit of a bottleneck here, as trains going to Cambridge have to cross the first lines to get there from the slow lines. Sorry, from the down slow, correction. They have to cross then the first lines. As you can see, the signal ahead has now cleared, so I'm going to go into full power. We are now passing through Hitchin station, and as the signal is showing a double yellow signal aspect, we should be clear to just power up to get up to about 60 or 70 miles per hour. Should the signal turn green, then we can go faster than that. The signal has now turned green, so I'm now going to keep powering up and accelerate up to around 90 miles per hour, because we've got around 4.5 miles to go at this point to our stop at Stevenage. What I'm looking out for now is a small Morpeth board which has a 40 mph speed warning on it, and that has a left-hand pointing arrow, which means 40 mph for trains travelling across onto the other line, across the points. On the AWS ramp after that Morpeth board, we are then 1 mile from Stevenage, and so that's a good marker to know so that I'll know roughly when to put on the brakes. Now that we're at 90 mph, I've just idled the power to allow the train to coast, and so I'm now looking out for that Morpeth board. The Morpeth board is just coming up now. You can now see that 40 sign with the arrow pointing left. On this AWS ramp, we're now 1 mile from Stevenage. I'm going to make a step 4 brake application just as we pass the signal there. In fact, I've gone slightly higher, went to step 5, so I'm just releasing the brakes slightly down to step 4. You can now see the station at Stevenage coming up in the distance. I'm going to go back up to step 5 braking to try and ensure that we slow down in time. At Stevenage we do need to stop right at the other end of the platform. And I'm aiming to enter the platform at around 35 mph, so I've just released the brakes again slightly back down to step 4. As you can see, we're now down to 40 and 35, so I'm going to enter the platform slightly slower than I planned, so I've just released the brakes again slightly more. And now I'll just move between the different brake positions 3 to 5 to try and bring the train to a controlled stop. I have slowed down just slightly too much, so I've just had to release the brakes just to allow the train to coast momentarily. And this is roughly the right stopping point. As you can see, there's a slight train simulator bug happening just ahead. It seems that a woman's decided to take a stroll off the platform and just casually stroll around between the tracks while walking on thin air, it looks like. Unfortunately, it seems that Dovetail Games still haven't managed to fix the passenger bugs in this game, which can be slightly annoying sometimes, if not amusing. So starting from Stevenage, the starting speed limit is 125 mph, and we've got around 27.5 miles to go to the next and final stop, which is London King's Cross. The Hertford Loop is now departing on the left, and the Hertford Loop will rejoin us again at Alexandra Palace in London. It seems that when making this route, Dovetail Games did actually lay the track for the Hertford Loop, but unfortunately decided not to give us the scenery for it, which isn't the first time they've done that. I'm not exactly sure why they do it, but if you look at the Portsmouth direct route, for example, there's probably a good 100 miles extra track that's been laid without any scenery, and it would be great if all of the scenery was covered, because it would give us one large network to drive trains on. Another route that's also happened on is the Great Eastern route, where we have the Harwich branch which departs from Manningtree, again with all the track there but no scenery. We're now approaching Nebworth station. The slow lines are just about to join the first lines here, and this is the start of what I mentioned earlier, which is known as the double track bottleneck on this route. This is only around the 2-mile section of double track, and then the slow lines restart again. The speed limit will shortly be dropping to 115 miles per hour, which will then be the highest speed limit all of the way to London. We're now entering the 115 mile per hour speed zone, and now we enter the first of many tunnels that we go through on this journey. I'm not sure of the names of all of them, but I am going to look them up and put them in the captions on this video. So there's 2 tunnels here, separated by a short gap. I believe that the second tunnel is called Welland North Tunnel. I'm not sure what this first tunnel is called. At the other end of this second tunnel, we will be passing through Welland North Station. We're now crossing Welland Viaduct. As you can see, we now have 4 tracks again, and we will in fact be 4 tracks now all of the way into London King's Cross. Just to the right of us is Welling carriage sidings, and just ahead of us that we're about to pass through is Welling Garden City Station. Local services operate from Welling Garden City, calling at all stations to Moorgate and also all stations to London King's Cross. And these local services are operated by Class 313 electric multiple units, which would be absolutely great to see in Train Simulator, but unfortunately we don't have any yet. But if one is made, I'd certainly be very keen to drive it and make a route learning video on the stopping services between Welling and London. Not Welling, sorry, Welling and London. Now that we're at 115 miles per hour, I've reduced the power to step 1, which should allow us to just lose a little bit of speed. And then when we get down to around 113 miles per hour, I'll reapply power to step 2 just to bring us back up again. We're now passing through Hatfield Station. Just the other side of Hatfield on a curve, I believe it will be a left-hand curve coming up shortly. In the year 2000 saw quite a bad train crash. A Class 91 set operating the London King's Cross to Leeds service was doing 115 miles per hour when the outer rail of this curve shattered underneath the middle of the train, causing a large part of the train to derail, although the loco stayed on. After this, it was revealed that there were many such cracks in rails across the United Kingdom, and many speed restrictions were imposed. I believe it was in the order of several thousand speed restrictions were imposed until all of this track could be examined and replaced as required. We're now approaching Welham Green Station. We're now passing through Brookman's Park. When we reach the next station, which is Potter's Bar, I will idle the power as we enter the platform, and just as we're leaving the platform I will go up to step 4 braking to slow down for a speed drop to initially 105 and then 100 miles per hour. The 105 speed limit is not actually marked on the HUD. Now idling the power as we pass through Potter's Bar platform. And I've now made a step 4 brake application to bring our speed down. Also, apologies a minute ago for having to clear my throat, that was unintentional. Potter's Bar was the site of another train crash in the year 2002 when a Class 365 travelling at 100 miles per hour derailed on a set of points which changed underneath the rear carriage of the train. The rear carriage then derailed and mounted the platform. The speed limit is now no higher than 100 miles per hour all of the way into London King's Cross. We're currently passing through Potter's Bar Tunnel, which will be the longest tunnel we pass through on the journey today. As you can see, I also slowed down just slightly too much when trying to brake for the 100 speed limit, so I'm just applying a little bit of power to bring our speed back up towards 100 miles per hour. We're now entering Hadley Wood North Tunnel. After we've passed through this tunnel, we're now officially inside the London boundary. Straight after the tunnel we pass through Hadley Wood Station, which we're passing now. The middle platform, island platform, is not in use as the fast lines run both sides of that platform. And now we're in Hadley Wood South Tunnel. I allowed our speed just to crawl up slightly too much there. I think we might have hit 101 miles per hour unintentionally. I'm now going to allow the train to coast to let us lose just a little bit of speed, and then I'll go back into step 1 power as we lose speed. We're now passing through New Barnard Station. We're now passing through Oakley Park Station. As you can see now that we're inside London, these stations are gradually getting closer together as we get towards central London. We're now approaching New Southgate Station. We're now half a mile from the next speed limit, which is a drop down to 95 miles per hour. So at this point I'm just going to idle the power and allow the train to coast. The 95 speed limit will be just before the tunnel, just coming up. So I've just applied light braking just to ensure that we aren't breaking the speed limit at this point. I've now applied step 1 of power to try and ensure that we don't lose too much speed. Very shortly rejoining us from the left will be the lines from the Hertford Loop. And also on the left we're about to pass Bounds Green Depot, which is the main maintenance depot for the HSTs and Class 91 sets in London. The station that you can see just ahead is Alexandra Palace. And it's named after the famous palace, which is actually up on the hill, just to the right of us. I believe it may have actually been put in game, but you won't be able to see it from track level. Apologies for the lag here, it often happens just between Alexandra Palace and Hornsey. I think it's due to the large amount of track work and also the large amount of trains which are parked up, which have been added as static AI. Now idling the power once again. And just to the left of us is Hornsey EMU depot, which is the main EMU depot for what was first Capital Connect. I believe the franchise is now Great Northern. We're now passing through Hornsey Station, which means that we're 3/4 of a mile from the next speed limit, which is down to 90 miles per hour. The 90 mile per hour speed limit comes into force at the next signal, so once again I will use light braking if required, just to ensure that we don't break the speed limit. Though looking at the speedometer now, I don't think we're going to need that braking. We're now passing Haringey Station. The speed limit has now dropped to 90 miles per hour, and we now have a warning for a further drop in speed to 80 miles per hour. The warning for the 80 limit is just over 3/4 of a mile from the limit. And the braking point for the 80 speed limit will be at the next overbridge just coming up. I'm now using a step 3 brake application to bring our speed off, because shortly after Finsbury Park Station, which we're now passing through, the speed limit will drop further to 65 miles per hour, so I want to ensure that we don't break that speed limit. Finsbury Park is the last station we pass through before London King's Cross. As you can see, the speed limit has now gone down to 80. And now that we're at 65 miles per hour, I'm just releasing the brakes. In fact, we've slowed down just slightly too much there. However, I'm going to continue to allow the train to coast, as we will shortly be going on a downhill gradient as we head towards London King's Cross. just had a warning for a further speed limit reduction to 60 miles per hour. We are now going downhill on a gradient as steep as 1 in 107. So I'm going to use step 1 of braking just to ensure that we don't break the speed limit. As we enter the tunnel just coming up, which is Copenhagen Tunnel, we're around half a mile from the next speed reduction, which is to 45 miles per hour. Going to apply the brakes around halfway through the tunnel. I've now made a step 3 brake application to try and bring our speed off a bit quicker, and now up to step 4. In fact step 5, because I'm not sure where the 45 board is. I'm now bringing our brake application back down to step 2. We're now passing under HS1, or the high speed line, which runs from London St Pancras through the Channel Tunnel into France and Belgium, and also for high-speed southeastern services, and of course we travel that route on the London to Faversham add-on, which is available for Train Simulator. The speed limit drops to 15 miles per hour about halfway through this tunnel. In fact, you can just about see the glow of the 15 speed board coming up on the left and right. Although we do need to take notice that when entering the tunnel I was given a single yellow signal, which means that the ground signal at the end of the tunnel is showing a red aspect, which won't allow us to proceed. We're now down to 15 miles per hour in time for the reduction. You can see that we're now passing the 15 mile per hour speed board. And I'm just trying to use the brakes now in the tunnel here to control our speed. And ultimately also to slow down and stop at the red ground signal coming up. As you can see, the ground signal has now cleared with 2 white lights and the indicator above it with the number 3, indicating that we are now cleared into platform 3 here at London King's Cross. I do have to remember now that the speed limit starting up is 15 miles per hour. It's interesting to note that Gasworks Tunnel that we just passed through had a third portal to the left of us which used to be in use, so the exit from King's Cross used to actually be 6 tracks and not 4. As we reach 15 miles per hour, I'm now going to idle the power to allow the train to coast. And we will now coast all of the way into London King's Cross, right to the end of the platform. now just going to gradually and slowly bring our speed down by making small step 1 brake applications and then releasing as we get closer to the end. I know that in real life HSTs here don't stop as close to the buffers as maybe some units would, so I'm going to aim to stop closer to the end of this fence just coming up on the left. Here we are, arrival at London King's Cross. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope that you've enjoyed the video. Please don't forget that you can now find me on Facebook under PTG Rail, and also you can become a patron of this channel by going to my Patreon page if you'd like to do so. The links for both of these will be posted in the description of the video. Also notice here the people walking through the train, which is again quite amusing. It would, as I said earlier, it would be great if the bug was fixed. Unfortunately it hasn't been so far. Again, thanks for watching.